Hello, welcome. Today we will talk about the Uber hits a bump in the road case. Most of you are familiar with the ride-sharing companies, specifically Uber, which is very popular in the United States, but many forms of the ride-sharing companies actually have now been in some of the bigger cities around the globe. And also, if you remember the movie Stuber, so you can see here the actors who did the filming of the movie Stuber in Hollywood. And in that case, obviously his name was Stu, but he was an Uber driver. So the name of the movie became Stuber. So people started calling him Stuber. So that was kind of interesting. But let us look at basically how Uber was founded and what are some of the business ethics and other emerging challenges that they have faced in the workplace. This case introduces the ride-sharing service Uber. Overall, consumers use the Uber app to contact a driver in a nearby vicinity when they want a ride. So this is for those of you who are not familiar with how the ride-sharing companies seem to work. The app also allows consumers to get an estimated time of arrival on their smartphones with the use of an integrated GPS system. I regularly use Uber, at least here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and when I travel abroad in some cases, specifically when I have the app on my phone. Many people use Uber as an alternative to taxis, which is upending the taxi industry on a global scale. Obviously, some of you are familiar with the fact that Uber has had difficulty in international environments, and in some cases they have very, very stiff competition, and in some cases they've had to adjust to the laws of foreign countries because regulations seem to be stronger in some countries compared to others. Uber is having an impact on other industries as well. For example, companies like Zappos are planning to adopt Uber's surge-based pricing strategy. Drivers for Uber act as independent contractors who can run their own ride-sharing business and drive whenever they choose to do so. However, Uber is encountering a lot of challenges as it expands globally. Internally, Uber is facing some problems with its drivers. There has been quite a number of consumers who have complained from various incidents. Despite the driver's status as independent contractors, Uber still exerts much control over the drivers, including setting rates for them. In California, lawsuits have been filed by Uber drivers claiming that they should be legally considered employees as opposed to independent contractors. One driver won a lawsuit against Uber in California. Uber might need to amend its strategy so that Uber drivers will fall beneath the employee threshold. Also, Uber has faced many difficulties from the taxi industry. The taxi industry points out that it is unfair, to them at least, that Uber gets to offer taxi-like services without having its drivers go through the same licensing requirements that taxi drivers must go through, at least in the United States. And in European countries, the regulations are even stronger for taxi drivers. Many governments seem to agree, and Uber has been partially or wholly banned in some places like France, Germany, India, Australia, South Africa, Spain, and Indonesia. Protests of taxi drivers further discourage Uber's expansion across the globe. An alleged rape in India by an Uber driver has caused some governments to question how Uber actually vets its drivers, prompting the company to implement more safety measures. Uber has also clashed with some laws, such as the American with Disabilities Act, because many of the drivers drive their own personal vehicles, which are not wheelchair friendly for consumers who are on wheelchair. In 2017, Uber's co-founder and CEO, Travis Kalanick, resigned. Kalanick was known for his aggressive strategies, and critics believe this began to trickle down into the corporate culture for the company. Also, some female employees at Uber claimed they had suffered sexual harassment on the job. Uber's resistance to releasing its diversity statistics also led to major criticism of the company in their decisions. The investigation into the harassment claims resulted in 20 employees being fired from the company. Investors were very uneasy about Kalanick's leadership ability and pressured him to resign, although he does remain on the board. Despite the challenges that Uber has faced, it has a bright future ahead of it because of their model. Uber has expanded its operation to 425 cities in 72 countries around the world and is valued at around $70 billion US, making it the world's most valuable startup. Approximately 30 million users use Uber services every single month. It has become by far one of the most well-known companies in the ride-sharing economy. This case provides you with an excellent opportunity to examine the ethical challenges that an innovative and disruptive company faces as it begins the company and as it tries to expand nationally and internationally around the globe. There are many business ethics issues that they face, and if you overcome it successfully, then obviously consumers will continue to use your company. In summary, let us talk about a few questions related to Uber. What are the ethical challenges that Uber faces in using app-based peer-to-sharing technology? The biggest challenge involves how it is competing against the taxi industry. Uber drivers are not necessarily yet subject to the same license requirements as taxi operators are, and this gives them a distinct and perhaps somewhat unfair competitive advantage in the industry of taxis and ride sharing. Also, Uber exerts less control over what it calls its independent contractor drivers. Using an app to bypass some of the controls the taxi industry has, as well as its multitude of drivers, means that headquarters has less control over what its contractors do. Sometimes there's also the issue of liability for the contractors. So instead of the company taking responsibility, that means the independent contractor is liable for certain misconducts. This brings up the issue of safety, which is evidenced by the fact that a woman in India was allegedly raped by the so-called Uber driver. The ease of use of peer-to-sharing apps also enables consumers to get past regulations that might hinder Uber's activities. Again, an example would be India. In India, Uber was banned from certain areas, but consumers continue to access services. Finally, there's always the element of security that Uber must consider. Because it depends upon digital technology, it is possible for hacking to occur and data to be stolen. As cybercrime increases, Uber must have the proper controls in place to protect both its own as well as its clients' information and data. Since Uber is using a disruptive business model in marketing strategy, what are the risks that the company will have to overcome to be successful? The biggest risk Uber faces is regulatory opposition to its operation. Because Uber drivers do not have to adhere to the same licensing requirements as taxi drivers in the United States, some countries are banning Uber until they agree to have their drivers licensed according to the local country's laws. The taxi industry is a big industry and has a lot of power in some countries. Since Uber is disrupting the taxi industry, it will have to fight against taxi operators and drivers continually as they seek to impede Uber's progress. Uber must also adopt clear insurance policies to make certain that drivers are covered and perform background checks on drivers so they can ensure consumers that they will be taken to their destination safely. Uber has also clashed with certain laws, such as the Americans with Disabilities Act. Because its drivers use their own personal vehicles, not all of the cars and vehicles are wheelchair accessible. Also, Uber has been so successful because of its independent contracting model that others are going to be obviously copying their best practice. So you see many other ride-sharing companies have popped up over the last 5-6 years to compete with them. With a California judge determining that Uber driver was an employee and not necessarily an independent contractor, the company was forced to pay reimbursement expenses. So this could set a precedent for similar lawsuits in other states for ride-sharing companies in customers. Uber must overcome opposition from regulators as well as the taxi industry, licensing challenges, and internal struggles to continue its upward route of success. Because Uber is so popular and the business model is being expanded to other industries, should there be regulation to develop compliance with standards to protect competitors and consumers? Of course, your view, again, in my view, might vary, and we might have different views at different times depending on the nation, country, and laws at a given time. However, those that tend to support regulations, they point out that Uber does not have the same license requirements or background checks as taxi drivers do. And it has been expanding into different countries quickly without necessarily considering how country or city regulation might affect the company as well as the drivers. So they would likely argue that additional compliance is needed both to eliminate an unfair competitive advantage as well as to promote the safety of consumers who ride at Uber cars. Those who are against regulations tend to believe that governments and taxi industry are simply trying to impede Uber because of its low cost and high success rate. They might point out that additional compliance could hinder Uber's growth and deter other companies from creating innovative, disruptive ideas. If you're looking for more research related to ride-sharing companies, again, you can search them online or use the few that is provided here on this slide. But obviously, there's going to be more updated links in articles that you can rely upon to get more recent information from this year into your research papers. As always, remember that ethical behavior is a skill, so you need to police, evaluate, and improve your ethical muscles at all times, even when you're riding an Uber car. Good luck.